Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Pup and Away podcast. My name is Stephanie. I am Steph the Pro Dog Mom on some of my social media stuff. I am a certified dog trainer, canine behaviorist, and canine nutritionist, and the very proud owner of Pup and Away, where we specialize in pet care with a behavioral edge over in San Antonio. That is boarding, daycare, tailored play sessions, training, all kinds of stuff, but not grooming and not vet services. So don't look us up for that. Today we're talking about commonly misinterpreted body language. When it comes to our dogs, there's quite a variety of different behaviors that I see dogs display in different scenarios. And it's confusing because that same behavior can mean many different things, always depending on the situation. So when you study dog behavior, you soon find out that there's many different behaviors that dogs do that are kind of multi-purpose. Yawning and panting, for example, may be things that your dog does when they're tired or they're hot, respectively, but they can also be signs that they are stressed. Today we're breaking down behaviors that have many meanings or that they're often misinterpreted. So one thing that you definitely want to keep in mind is it's all about context and the scenario. You can't just look at one specific body part and expect for it to tell you everything. You have to be able to look at all different parts of the body, and as well as the situation and the environmental context as well. So since I just mentioned yawning and panting, let's finish those off, as well as some other stress-related behaviors. So if you ever see your puppy yawn and they are just waking up and they're stretching, you can pretty much bet that that is more of a sleep-related reason. But again, context is important. Just like pretty much every other behavior that we're going to talk about today, and pretty much any behavior that we ever really talk about, it's all about context. When looking at a yawn specifically, are you noticing that there's maybe other signs of stress? So for example, maybe your dog is trying to get away from another dog. Maybe they're kind of like slinking up against the corner. Maybe they're experiencing a stressful situation like being at the vet, being in the car, being introduced to new dogs, and that's kind of a new experience for them. So again, that environmental context. Maybe they're experiencing a thunderstorm. Context can definitely tell you a lot. And again, are there other body parts that you can look at for more clues? For example, shaking and shivering paired with a lot of that yawning can be stress. Or maybe you just have a Chihuahua who's always shaken like a leaf. Is your dog trying to climb up into your lap and they're yawning? Different things like that. So again, you have to be looking at other behaviors that your dog's doing, other body parts, and of course that context. A nervous yawn will also be accompanied by some other signs of stress-related behaviors like panting. How can you tell the difference between, hey, I'm just really hot pant and a stress pant? Usually just kind of by looking at the shape of that mouth over there on the corners and the sides of their mouth. If the edges of the mouth are pulled back and they're really tight towards the eyes and they create a very narrow shaped C, this is more likely a stress pant. Sometimes also getting a baseline for what your dog normally looks like whenever they're just panting because they just finished a walk outside is sometimes really good, because sometimes like the level or the rate of their breath can also change. Of course, if they're super hot, their breath rate will change there also, but that can also just be a slight little indicator for you as well. So if the mouth is like very wide open and more of a larger C at like a wider C at the base of the mouth, that's usually more, I'm just hot and trying to cool down. But both of these behaviors are thought to help So both panting and yawning are behaviors that are thought to help regulate the nervous system during times of stress. Yawning is thought to slow down breath rate, and panting is thought to cool down the body from a raise in the temperature that may result in a rise in adrenaline and cortisol. So panting, in both scenarios, whether we're actually really hot or we're experiencing stress, is some sort of a thermoregulation there. But again, why we got the body heat raised in the first place is two different things. Either I just went for a walk or a run and I'm hot, or because I'm nervous and those cortisol and adrenaline levels are up, now I'm hot. Next, let's talk about appeasement behaviors. They may be done during greetings or intense interactions. The goal of displaying these behaviors may be to diffuse certain interactions, keep things calm, deliver a message of I come in peace or I mean you no harm, right? So we're trying our best to dampen the intensity of maybe those experiences. So again, we got yawning. While a dog might be trying to diffuse the situation because they're feeling stressed, right? I also see a lot of skilled dogs who notice stress patterns from other dogs and yawn in an attempt to calm down, to appease that other dog. So it's definitely something that can be given to a dog to calm down, as well as be given by a dog to calm things down. This is a behavior that I also like to do whenever I'm interacting with new dogs that I know are nervous. Making my eyes really soft and yawning a bunch is one way that I try to, with my body language, tell the dog that I mean them no harm, especially while I'm trying to get them to kind of warm up to me. One of my other behaviors that I really love to talk about is lip licking or tongue flicking. If your dog just ate something and they lick their lips, obviously they're probably licking their lips more because they just ate something and not necessarily for an appeasement reason. However, in interactions with another dog or a person, you see the tip of the tongue come out very quickly, like a kind of like a lizard sort of, but not all the way out. Or sometimes it's very slow and drawn out. And again, this is a sign of I come in peace. Now, the biological reason on this one is a little bit unclear. Some think that since licking is calming and soothing for dogs, that it might kind of be an extension of that. And sometimes this behavior is missed quite often because it can happen so quickly. So usually whenever I'm looking back at like dog interactions, like on the daycare floor, this is something where sometimes I have to really slow down and watch frame by frame just to kind of see what exactly is going on with with the tongue. Rollovers are another behavior that often get misinterpreted. If it's meant to be appeasing, again, you will see it displayed with one or a few of other behaviors. Dogs that walk up slowly to a person, like kind of in like a slinking sort of movement. They'll roll over. Sometimes they'll lick their lips. Maybe sometimes they might even like pee themselves, right? That's not really an invitation to play, but instead they're trying to start off that interaction with like, I mean you no harm, please don't escalate this, I'm just a simple little dog coming to tell you hello. It is highly debatable here if a belly rub is truly wanted here, right? So I think people often think a dog comes up to me, rolls over, shows me their belly, they definitely want me to go ahead and pet and scratch. But again, what were those behaviors that led up to it? One behavior that I don't have in my notes, and I should definitely talk about it here in this context right now, is peeing, right? Appeasement peeing and excitable peeing. You have to watch what the dog is doing to kind of differentiate between the two. If the puppy or the dog is excited and jumping up on you and that tail is wagging really fast and they're peeing, most likely they're peeing because they're excited. But if the dog is getting very small and kind of curling down while you're bending over to pet them and then you realize that they've peed, most likely you scared the piss out of them, literally. So that's something definitely to keep in mind there. Let's kind of go back to those belly rubs a little bit. To think that these behaviors are being done to diffuse and calm a situation would make me really want to think again if that dog wants me to escalate the situation and make contact with their belly. So I just kind of want to break that down a little bit more because again, depending on the behaviors that led up to that scenario can definitely really tell you a lot, or how that dog is rolling over. So I have a client who I see and I just know his general demeanor is nervous. He is nervous of like new experiences. If he heard something for the first time, his initial reaction is more of a startle than anything. And the majority of the time that I've spent working with him, it's been to overcome fears, not necessarily basic manners. So I just know that this kid, again, is just kind of soft-tempered and just more on the nervous side. He'll walk up to his mom, he'll walk up to me, and he absolutely loves me. I love him. He'll walk up to his other favorite people kind of slowly. He'll roll over. He'll also give that long lip lick, like a as he's rolling over. That'll only make sense if you can watch this at the same time. And I'll also lift up a leg to expose his belly. Now, it most likely sounds like, kind of the way they just described it. He's moving slowly, you've got the lip lick, it's a slow rollover. All of those things tend to, if I'm just watching it for the very first time, makes me think that he is trying to show appeasement in this scenario, right? But his mom always rubs his belly. I'm sure a lot of the other people that he meets in those situations are also rubbing his belly. So I think sometimes dogs are just kind of also quote unquote shy whenever they're showing this sort of behavior, because if he really did not want his belly rubbed and it continuously got rubbed in that scenario, you would think that he would stop doing that behavior because it was leading to an outcome in which he doesn't want. So clearly the outcome that he's receiving, people going and touching his belly, is something that he's open to and does want, and also to know that he doesn't do this sort of behavior with people that he's just met. But I also think that that's kind of wrapped up not just truly in excitement, but also a little bit of trepidation there as well, which is very interesting. So even though you see specific context, kind of also knowing the history of that dog, I think is really important. We also have another kiddo who comes into our daycare, and she displays a lot of the same things when she walks into a group of dogs. So like if she's like the last kiddo to be dropped off, or maybe there's already 6 other kiddos in the group when she gets dropped off. She comes in, she walks really slow into the group, and then she just slowly rolls on over. And I don't blame her, right? Walking into a group of dogs like that, when they all get really excited and they kind of like rush over at you, despite us trying our best to body block, she just kind of like, I accept defeat, and I am no threat. Just sniff me, hurry up, and we'll get over and done with. And as soon as they're all done, then she gets up and she walks away, right? And so that's one where we know, okay, maybe she, again, doesn't have a high confidence rate there, but she's still very open to going. She genuinely does like daycare. She plays with other dogs, and she does have a good time whenever she's there. So again, it's one of those things where, again, maybe that confidence just isn't super high. Maybe more along the lines of like introverted, right? She's open to having some social experiences, but she's a little bit more on the shy side and kind of has to warm up a little bit. So again, knowing the context of your dog and the history of your dog is super important. Let's also talk about some, maybe not really misinterpreted, but maybe some misunderstood body language here as well. And this is mostly because these are things that society tells us and they're just simply not correct. So the first one, I often hear people say like, oh, if their tail is wagging, that means that they're happy, right? Not necessarily. We want to think about the tail as like a really big spectrum of things. And we always want to land somewhere in the neutral mid-range of stuff. So let's talk about like height of the tail. You can have a tail that's really tucked. That means really scared. And I can have a tail that's very like high and stiff. That means alert, danger, making some decisions on whether or not this is a good or bad scenario, and I'm ready to fight, not flight, right? But when you have that mid-range, more on that same level as like maybe along the lines of their back, or maybe just kind of like a limp, loose tail. So the more neutral of height that I can get on that tail, the more neutral that the dog is feeling. Especially too when it comes to like the speed of the tail. If I have a dog that has a really slow wag, usually, again, you kind of have to look at everything else in the context, because I'm pretty sure I could probably also think of a neutral dog that had a really slow tail wag. But usually that's a little bit more along the lines of like, I'm nervous, I'm not quite too sure what to do here, I'm kind of scared, or things that are wagging really fast. That's usually more an intense emotion, whether that's intense excitement, again, whether that's intense, I'm scanning the scenario to figure out if I gotta jump into attack mode or anything like that. That's definitely something to keep in mind. How the tail is wagging is also something we want to keep in mind. If you have a like vertebrae follows vertebrae sort of a wag, I kind of like to call this my Princess Diaries wag. You know how in Princess Diaries they show her how to wave, how your wrist follows your palm, follows your fingers. That sort of tail wag is more neutral and friendly. If you got a tail wag that is tick-tock, and kind of, it's very stiff and kind of moves more like a stick. Again, that might be something more along the lines of like intense and alert. So there's lots of different things that you have to be looking at as far as the tail goes, position, speed, height, different things like that, because it's not all just a wagging tail means a happy dog. The next one that I think people often get wrong is hair standing up on the back of the head, on the back of the neck. A lot of people think that your dog is about to be aggressive, your dog is about to start a fight, your dog is about to be mean and bite. And that's not necessarily the case. I like to tell people that hair raised on the back of the neck and also along the back, sometimes it can go all the way down to the base of the tail, is more like a really big exclamation point literally drawn on your dog's back. So whatever your dog is feeling, they're feeling to a heightened sense. So oftentimes we have dogs in daycare who play with their hair raised on, like that's just their baseline. So we know that that's just kind of normal for them. Most dogs, though, as they play and that hair goes up on the back of that neck or the back or the tail, that typically means I'm getting overstimulated and I'm probably going to need help calming down just a bit. So that's usually when we'll step in. Again, not because the dog's about to be mean on purpose, but the intensity, the energy level is just getting a little too out of hand there. I also see Rishi, for example, whenever she's sleeping, if she's having a dream, sometimes the hair on her back will go up. But of course, it can be something like, if I'm looking at something scary and, I have to make myself look a little bit bigger, or I am definitely getting to be ready to be in fight mode. That, again, context-wise, maybe that's mixed with some growling and some vocalization there. Maybe that tail is really high and rigid and ticking fast instead of loosely wagging. So again, context is everything there. But yeah, hair on the back of the neck standing up doesn't simply mean aggression. And the last one that I want to talk about, and this is something that I wish every single person who ever interacts with any dog ever knows, is simply just sniffing. When a dog comes to sniff you, people think that, if the dog came up to me to sniff me, it must be okay for me to touch them. Absolutely not. Sniffing is not an invitation to pet that dog. I meet a lot of nervous dogs doing what I do, and I meet a lot of nervous dogs also because it's my job to kind of help the pet parent figure out how can we get them more acclimated to people and experiences and dogs and all the things, right? So if a dog goes up to a person to sniff, all they're trying to do there is gather information about the person or the dog, and they're trying just to come up with, just get to know you, right? I'm just trying to sniff you, get some information, but people automatically think the dog interacted with me, so I'm just going to shove my hands in their face. If you watch to see the body language of that dog while they're sniffing, that can definitely tell you a lot. If the dog just walks right on up to you and is like sniffing you and they're not leaning in to reach you with their nose, most likely you can probably interact with that dog, but I would first interact vocally before just reaching out for that dog. Most of the time, these nervous dogs that are coming up, they're kind of getting a little low to the ground, so there's going to be a little bit of a bend in those front elbows, and they're also doing lots of leaning in towards the person to get close enough to sniff. So while this is the person here, the dog might be way back here, but leaning in ever so slightly to get that information. So basically what ends up happening is that dog's getting close enough to gather information, but their body language is prepped and ready to hop back the moment that this uncertain thing that I'm sniffing gives me a reason to be afraid of it. And that's usually what ends up happening there. So I want you to think of like you just got set up on a blind date, right? And you're there first at the bar or restaurant or whatever it is, and your date walks in, or the person that you assume is your date walks in, and so you wave across the bar or you wave across the restaurant to like, hey, I'm over here. And all of a sudden that person takes off full speed running at you. Things just escalated really quickly, right? And that's not something that you expected. You don't know if they're going to run up to you and kiss you or hug you or hit you. You just don't know what's going to happen. And if that person is the only person that ever does that, okay, cool. Maybe Roger's just a freaking weirdo and he doesn't know good socialization skills, right? The biggest thing here too that I want to get to is, especially if you own the dog that is doing these behaviors whenever they're meeting another person, you really need to learn how to read that body language and coach whoever it is that your dog is meeting how to interact with your dog at that moment. Hey, I understand that Rufus is leaning in to sniff you, but don't touch him. Just let him gather some information right now. Or already prompted up beforehand with, hey, Rufus is a little nervous, so if he sniffs you, please just don't reach out for him. Because if that, we people, right, just in general, keep this misunderstanding of they sniff, I should pet. So it keeps happening for that dog over and over and over again. Over and over and over again, that dog goes up to a new person. I'm a little bit nervous, I sniff you. And every single time it ends in a negative reaction like that, your dog is no longer going to trust people. So let's take it back to that blind date example, right? If Roger was the only person that ever did this, okay, we just think Roger is the weirdo. However, if the next 5 or 6 dates that you go on, it starts off that way, you're going to start to be a little bit weary about whatever, whoever's setting you up on these blind dates or whatever social media it is that you're, like whatever dating profile or dating app that you're using, right? Because obviously there's just a bunch of weirdos on this app. So you start to lose trust in the scenario and in the context. And pretty soon you're not going out on blind dates anymore. Pretty soon that dog is now growling and snapping at people from way far away and not even wanting to get close to say hello or getting close enough to get that information to begin with. So this is the reason why many dogs become fearful or reactive, because we as their owner sometimes don't understand this concept of sniffing doesn't mean say hello, I need to advocate for my dog, and we accidentally keep allowing these sorts of interactions to happen time and time again, so the puppy loses the ability to be curious and go straight to mistrusting people because we keep shoving hands in their faces. And so the whole let me shove my hand in dogs' faces so they can sniff me is really something that just needs to stop. I will sometimes like display my hand out, but if a dog is coming up to me, I'm not reaching my hand out at them. If they're already sniffing my hand, so their nose is already at my hand where my hand is, maybe I'll open my hand so that way they can kind of sniff other parts of my hand, but never ever is it, let me offer my hand to this dog, let me stretch and reach out to this dog, because that can just be too much. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is conflicting emotion. So these are behaviors that I see when a dog is experiencing some sort of conflicting emotion. And I think these ones are kind of fun, but also kind of weird, obviously. And the biggest one is humping. Humping is a very complex behavior, and I've talked about it in some other episodes, and I plan on talking about it again in some future episodes as well. But in the sense that we're talking about today, again, conflicting emotions, let me give you an example so that way I can kind of help you understand what I mean. Like I said before, I meet a lot of nervous dogs, and because I know what to do, I'm not reaching my hands out and things like that, I do all the right things. I allow for that dog to come up to me and sniff me without reaching for them. They're allowed to, either get even closer to me after that or to back away and try again a bit later. Sometimes, not all the time, but maybe I'm tossing treats at the dog to also create a positive association with me. Not necessarily to get the dog closer to me, but just, I like to be known as the chicken lady. So when I have a dog in front of me that I know normally gets nervous meeting new people, because all this is information that I get from a person before I even meet their dog, and I'm doing all the right things, this dog starts to feel comfortable with me pretty quickly, even though they tend to not normally be okay and comfortable with people right off of the bat. So this dog is sitting in front of me like, hey, you're actually not bad. Normally whenever I get myself into situations, like things normally go south already, but you seem to be okay. How do I take this relationship to the next level, right? So I get the dog into a scenario in which they're comfortable exploring something more with me, but it's something that they haven't practiced a bunch, because normally at this point in their interaction with a new person, they've already learned distrust. So they're not quite too sure what to do just yet. And or it's a little bit of, again, feeling something new in that moment. But I kind of want to say hi to you, but also I'm kind of nervous to say, to take this up a notch, because normally when I do, like, is it worth it for me to kind of put myself in danger? Like, there's a lot, I'm sure, that's going on. And of course I'm anthropomorphizing. I'm putting, these thoughts obviously into human English language. But the concept there is kind of along the lines of what I think the dog is experiencing. So we get like an awkwardness. I don't know what to do next. I'm still kind of nervous of trying something different, but I'm going to try something different anyways. So typically what ends up happening is I start to get a paw on my leg, and then the other paw comes up on my leg and wraps around, and then the dog typically starts to hump me. And then what ends up happening is sometimes the pet owner gets embarrassed, right? Because humping is embarrassing. And so then they get after the dog. And so I have to prep myself to tell the pet parent, I think your dog's about to hump me. Don't have a big freak out. It's okay. I understand that, from a human societal standpoint, it's not nice and it's weird and it's embarrassing, but from your dog's standpoint, he's just really trying to figure out what to do next. So typically I just kind of end up, pushing the dog off me very slowly and gently, but assertively, not ugly or anything like that, because I don't want to ruin the trust that we're building up, but I also need to be firm in my boundary there and just let him know, nice try, but that's not the right thing to do. And the last one that we'll talk about as far as conflicting emotions, again, I'll give you a very specific scenario, but it's something that I see often with a few other dogs, and I'm going to use Rishi as an example here. So barking, the way that Rishi barks in a specific scenario, whenever she was a puppy, okay, one thing to know about Rishi, if you don't know her or haven't seen her, she's about 12 pounds. She's pretty small. And when she was a baby, I had a harness that would have to go over her head and then buckle underneath her. And when I would get her ready to go out for walks, I know she loves walks. So she'd get really excited, she would hop around, she would jump around, she would bark. But when she would see me grab the harness and know what was going to come next, me going over her head, she would start to run away from me, and like her bark would kind of change a little bit. And so knowing her and having other experiences with her, I quickly learned also that she just doesn't love being pet over the head. Again, she's a tiny girl. People coming up to her and kind of looming over her and petting over her head, she does not love. If you try to pet her on the chest or under the chin, she's happy with that. But if you go over, she backs up very quickly. And so I realized there that she was excited to go for her walk, but she was also nervous or anxious and not looking forward to having to stick her head into that harness. So there I saw a very big mix of conflict of emotions. And this is something that I see often in other dogs too. So usually when I say that, I express to the pet parent what is going on, but you have one of two options. You can either really work to desensitize your dog to having things go over their head. What I chose with Rishi was just changing the harness that we were using to one that she didn't have to slip her head into. To me, that was a lot easier, and I didn't have to work as hard. Sometimes I like to work smarter, not harder. With simple change in tool versus teaching my dog something, for me was the better route to go there. So if you're kind of seeing that with your dog, that might be something that is going on there. So yeah, a lot of different behaviors, like I said, that are complex and multi-purpose, and it's definitely our job to look at things, multiple body parts on our dog, and the context of the situation and the history of the dog as well, to kind of figure out what exactly is going on, because it's not the same thing in every situation. All right, guys, so in the next episode, or maybe not in the next episode, I don't know when it's going to be airing, I have 2 more sessions that I'm recording today with some guests, and I'm just not too sure exactly in what order I'll be releasing them out into. But the next episode that I'll be recording all by myself, we're going to be talking about play behaviors and different things to keep an eye out for. So a lot of these play behaviors, again, good intentions, and the dogs are just having fun, but that can definitely escalate really quickly. So if you have a multi-dog household, if you take your dog to dog parks, if you are in charge of watching multiple dogs, say like in a doggy daycare setting, that's definitely an episode that you're going to want to catch. So I will catch you on the next one. Now, that might be the end of the episode, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. Follow us on social media. I'd love to connect with you. We have quite a few social media platforms. For nutrition and holistic pet care tips, follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Steph the Pro Dog Mom. You can find fun training tips on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Pup Pup and Away SA. If you're in San Antonio and you want to bring your dog to us for boarding, training, socialization, and nutrition, come find us. But if you're not in San Antonio, we do training and nutrition sessions virtually. Yes, they can be just as effective, I promise. Please rate, review, and subscribe to my podcast on whatever platform you listen on. And please, please, please share with a friend. The positive reinforcement of knowing people actually listen to this and find it valuable helps motivate me to keep on recording. We'll see you guys at the next episode.